Welcome to Front Office Pros. I'm Steve and this is Joe. Today we're going to be talking about starts and sits for week 10. As you will see, we do it a little bit differently. We're going to give you our consensus ceiling play. That means if you're going to be chasing points this week, you may want to consider putting this guy in your lineup. A floor play is bankable. You know they're going to get you points. It's a safe play. And then players that we're telling you should sit no matter what, we'll go through some options. So, Joe, let's start off with the quarterbacks. And our consensus ceiling play is your man, quarterback Justin Fields.
Yeah, absolutely, Steve. I mean, I loved him last week against the Dolphins. Absolutely smashed with 3 passing touchdowns and setting the record there with the over 175 yards rushing as well. And I not to say that he's going to have that same performance, but just as good of a matchup against the Detroit Lions, and I'd expect him to have another big week. I mean, I did 3 passing touchdowns. I don't know if you can expect that or, all those rushing yards as well, but he'd definitely be a great ceiling play for you this week against the Lions.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, he showed that he's capable of having a huge ceiling. And so Detroit obviously had a surprisingly good game against Aaron Rodgers. I don't see that happening again this time, especially having to defend against Fields' running ability. So I like him as a ceiling play. He should be in your lineup this week, unless, you have Mahomes and Fields, and obviously, you're not benching Mahomes, but, Fields a really good option. All right, let's talk about our floor play. So our floor play this week is Jimmy G against the Chargers.
Yeah, Jimmy G, he's not the sexy name out there, Steve, but he's definitely been effective for fantasy, and he's got the Chargers at home this week. Nice matchup for him, and I think if maybe you got a guy on bye this week, or have another, maybe you've been struggling with Rodgers as your quarterback or whatever. I mean, Garoppolo is going to be a good option for you just to give you a safe amount of points this week, and you could do a lot worse, that's for sure.
Yeah, definitely bankable points. If you have Burrow on bye, like you had mentioned for bye weeks, or if you have Aaron Rodgers, or even, maybe a Tom Brady, a lot of different quarterbacks haven't necessarily been great this year. Derek Carr, a couple that are coming to mind. So he's a guy that, rest assured, you're going to get a bankable amount of points. He's not going to lose you your matchup. He's going to keep you in your matchup. And, he may end up he's got a lot of weapons. So he may turn into an even better day. So safe floor option for you. Now our sit play is quarterback Justin Herbert going against the Niners.
Yeah, I still don't expect Keenan Allen to be back this week. Obviously, Mike Williams is still on IR, so really it's got, Everett, Josh Palmer, and DeAndre Carter to throw to. Herbert really hasn't been impressive the last few weeks, and it's doesn't get any easier for him against this 49ers defense on the road. I think he's safe to sit him, and I just think there's, better options out there potentially they could go to.
Yeah, that 49ers defense is stout, and I agree with you. I don't know if Keenan Allen will be back. Mike Williams certainly won't be back. And so those options are just limiting for him. He's done okay, but he hasn't been the dominant Herbert that so many were ready to crown him as this season. And he's got that rib injury he's dealing with. So other options I think are better. Let's go through a few. Would you start him over? We're saying you sit Herbert, but who do you start? Who do you start then? Right. So would you start, I'll name a few here, Joe. Would you start Dak at Green Bay? Would you start Brady versus Seattle, or Lawrence at KC? How about those are a few?
Yeah, I'd be willing to start Dak, and I think Lawrence. Brady is kind of where I draw the line there. I know people kind of look at Seattle and think it's a juicy matchup, and I know like a lot of the fancy sites have them as a low opponent ranking, but they've really been playing a lot better and have been a lot better limiting fantasy points the last few weeks. So it's something to watch out for. And then, the other thing to add on with the Herbert thing as well, it's like he didn't even dominate the Falcons offense. So that's another concern I have. Just if there was anything without his weapons to have a good week, you would have thought it would have been last week against the Falcons, and he didn't even really smash for you then. So
Yeah, right. I mean, the Falcons defense is one of the worst in the league, and it didn't translate to having a lot of fantasy points. I would start
no,
all three of them over Herbert. I'm not as concerned as
yeah,
you are with Brady. He's actually been even though there's a lot of that offense stalls a lot, he's actually been a pretty decent floor. He's going to get you, at least a decent amount of points. Now, we're telling you to sit. I wouldn't sit him for guys like Derek Carr, or even Russell Wilson, or even like Jared Goff. I wouldn't sit those guys instead of Herbert. Goff is interesting only because it could be a shootout, but I don't
yeah,
know. Sometimes you just got to play your studs, and if you lose, you lose. That one you might be overthinking it a little bit. Where those other guys we're talking about, I think, are more in the middle range that are more respectable start over Herbert. Whereas if you start a guy like Goff, you're more or less trying to stream, and you could get burned when you have like a quarterback that you drafted you expected a lot from.
yeah, yeah. I mean, even though Herbert hasn't been dominating, and he's been very disappointing. I still agree with you that the Goff and guys like that, even though I mean he is kind of intriguing, like you said, if that game's a shootout. But for those guys, I think I'd stick with Herbert.
Yeah, if you're really going to be chasing the points and you're a huge dog, maybe at that point you consider and say, I'm just going to do a dart throw and start a guy like Goff, or who knows, Tennessee isn't the best pass defense. Maybe Wilson turns it around after the bye. I mean, it's one of those. You're doing a Hail Mary, and then that's what you want
Yeah,
to do. That's what you want to do. That's a part of game management and situations. Based on who you're playing and trying to make the best decision.
yeah, 100%.
All right, so going to the running back position now. Our ceiling play, running back Tony Pollard against the Packers.
Yeah, I like Tony Pollard. He really showed what he could do with a full workload without Ezekiel Elliott, and then we still don't know exactly how healthy Ezekiel Elliott is. I know Jerry Jones says, "Oh, we're still going to get Zeke the ball," but we'll see. I think Zeke will probably get a lot of the first and second downs, but then Pollard will have his drives. He'll also probably have the third downs and involved in the receiving game, and he gets a couple big runs and a touchdown. He's going to have a good week for you. So that's what I bank on for the ceiling play.
Yeah, I agree with you. I have my suspicions as to how healthy Zeke is, and will he be as involved as it's being advertised by Jerry Jones. Pollard had a fantastic week before the bye, and coming out of the bye with some rest in him, I think he could do really well against the Packers. If you're chasing the points, I like him for his explosion.
Yeah, the Packers don't necessarily is it not a defense I'm scared to play, a running back against it. They're not really stout against that. They're kind of the middle of the road. So, I mean, matchup's not scary, and Zeke's usage doesn't scare me either. So,
all right, so our consensus floor play for the running back position is running back Jamaal Williams against the Bears.
yeah, I mean, we've seen teams being able to run against the Bears. I mean, we mentioned Pollard's big week right before the bye. That was against the Bears. I know DeAndre Swift is there, but then you got, they're still saying they're giving Swift too much, giving him the ball too much, even though they're only giving him the ball like 5 carries or something. It's just been crazy. And, I think he's a safe floor play because he gets the red zone touches. And as long as he gets you a touchdown, he's going to be a fine, safe floor play.
Yeah, I mean, you could see a shootout, with this Lions-Bears game. I mean, both of them have been susceptible to giving up a lot of points. So for me, I like that aspect of it. Not to mention, they try to use Swift in space. They're not going to be using Swift, I don't think, as much in the red zone. And like you said, if he gets a touchdown already, that alone is going to make him a good floor play. So, I mean, he's been a bankable floor play all year, believe it or not. So, to me, He's a guy that he's going to give you a decent amount of points, and you could plug and play, and you don't have to worry about him. And that's a nice feeling versus playing a guy and then he ends up giving you nothing. So to me, it's a nice floor option. Jamaal Williams is. All right, and our sit player is running back Leonard Fournette versus Seattle.
Yeah, Fournette's a guy that's been disappointing. My one worry with him, is the amount of action that Rachaad White has been getting. He's been getting more and more involved in the offense. And then you can just see Rachaad White has had a lot more juice than him, even though he's, his carries, he's still been getting, I think, like 8 or 9 the last couple of games, but he's only averaging like right around 2 yards per carry that he even has. So he hasn't been effective. White's shown more burst. Once again, Seattle's defense has been playing pretty well here. So it's not the juiciest of matchups. And I think there's other guys out there I'd rather play.
Yeah, I'm concerned about the Rachaad White usage. I think that really caps what his potential could be. I found it interesting on the broadcast. You were talking about Fournette being frustrated and kind of saying like, hey, I need to be in there. And White was saying something like, well, we need you or something. That's kind of a narrative thing. I wonder if one of these games he just ends up getting like another 20 carries and gets super involved. I could see it happening, but right now it doesn't look good for him. And I think there are some better options that would make more sense for your team. So let's go through a few of them. Would you start Miles Sanders versus Washington? We talked about Jamaal Williams against Chicago and Tony Pollard against the Packers.
Oh, I'm starting all 3 of those guys over Fournette this week.
Yeah, I agree. I start all 3. Let's keep going then. Would you start Devin Singletary against Minnesota, Antonio Gibson at Philly, and Najee Harris versus the Saints? You play those guys ahead of Fournette.
Now you're getting interesting, Steve. I don't know if I'd play Singletary over him. But I think
I got you stumped here.
Yeah, you really do, man. I think Singletary is the only one I wouldn't play over Fournette. I would go with, I'd be comfortable doing Harris and Gibson over Fournette this week. I know Harris hasn't been the best, but he's still the guy getting a majority of the workload. I know they said Jaylen Warren, they want to get a little more involved, but we don't know how much more involved that is. So, I think Harris is fine. And then Gibson, I know Philly's defense is really tough, but he's been more involved lately and even in the passing game. So I'd be willing to start those 2 guys as well over Fournette.
Yeah, see, I'd start Gibson over him, but I don't think I would start Singletary or Najee Harris over Fournette. Just feel like Najee's more of a floor play, and I think Fournette is more of a ceiling play, but they could get around the same points. So I just like the upside of Fournette versus I don't think Najee has as much of an upside.
That's interesting. You don't think Najee has much upside as Fournette, huh?
We've seen it with Fournette this year. We've not seen it from Najee. We've seen he would have, for a part of the season, Fournette was considered an RB1. Of course, I traded for him at that time. Now I look like I've lost my mind. But
yeah, just early in the season, he was getting over 20 touches, and he really hasn't even come close to that. And that's the problem. Like, I think he needs those touches in order to be, like I said, he's only averaging, like, over the last few games, he's struggling to get to 3 yards per carry, So I don't know.
So let's go to our wide receiver plays. We have our consensus ceiling play. So that's wide receiver DeVonta Smith against the Commanders.
Yeah, DeVonta Smith is a very risky play. I mean, he hasn't been very fantasy relevant for a lot of the year, but the 1 week that he was against the Commanders earlier in the year. Not to say that I expect that type of output from DeVonta Smith, but it just showed that the potential's there. with the matchup, maybe he is able to exploit it again, for at least 6 to 7 catches. And, I know he got well over 100 yards in that other one, but even if he gets, around 90 and at least a touchdown, he should be a good ceiling play for you.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you. I think he is definitely a ceiling play. He could bust on you, but we saw what he was capable of when he played the Commanders last time. So that gives me confidence. And if I'm chasing the points, he is able to do that. So I like it. I think he could really do well on the spot. And if you have guys like, and we'll talk about him a little bit later. Actually, I won't even spoil it for you. But if you guys got guys like Cortland Sutton or something like that, maybe you just take a dart throw and you go with DeVonta Smith.
Yeah, I'd love to take the dart throw with DeVonta Smith over Cortland Sutton. He's a guy I'm very concerned with.
All right, so when we go to our floor play, we're going to be talking about another Broncos receiver, wide receiver Jerry Jeudy going up against the Titans.
Yeah, Jeudy the last couple of weeks has gotten 6 or 7 catches and been targeted more than the other Broncos receivers on the team so far the last couple of weeks. So I think it's a trend that potentially should continue. He's been the one guy to consistently get open in that offense at the wide receiver position. So, and then the Titans secondary, it's interesting because I really thought the Chiefs were just gonna do whatever they wanted against the Titans for whatever reason. Titans were able to, tighten up and not allow that, but they don't have any names you recognize in their secondary, so you think that it's just should be a smash play. So, I think with the targets Judy's been getting and his output lately, I think he's a solid floor play for you and guy that's not gonna shouldn't goose you and should be a pretty safe play.
Yeah, I mean Byard's a good player in their secondary, playing in the safety spot, but I agree.
Corners though.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah, the corners. Well, you said secondary, but I think when it comes to Jeudy, I really like it because he does create a lot of separation for that offense. Maybe I'm wrong, but I have hope that coming out of the bye, they're gonna try to have some semblance of a plan. And Russ has been targeting Jeudy more so than any other receiver in that offense. So, and he has that ability to break away. So I mean, the Titans defense does not scare me. Their pass defense is not good. And when it comes to their running game, it's a mismatch of Chase Edmonds, Latavius Murray, and Melvin Gordon. So I don't see them winning that game through the ground. So they're going to have to throw. So I like his upside. I think he's going to be a good floor play for you. I would start. Ooh, okay, you all might think I'm nuts, but I probably would start him over Terry McLaurin this week. I feel better about him as a floor play than I do. I know Terry would show you that he's a better play, but I don't know. I feel.
I don't think you're nuts for saying that.
No.
Philly has probably, you could argue they got the 2 best corners in football with Bradbury and Slay the way they're playing this year. So I wouldn't blame you at all, even though McLaurin has been a lot better with Heineke back there. Those corners are real, and and Judy's not going up against Bradbury or Slay. So
no, exactly.
I don't think concern. It's actually, yeah.
With Heineke too, nonetheless.
Right.
So, all right, our sit play is Michael Pittman against the Raiders.
Yeah, this guy, I love his talent and guy I had high hopes for this year. But even though the Raiders defense doesn't necessarily scare me, it's really just, I don't know what the heck to expect out of the Colts offense with Jeff Saturday being the interim head coach. Ellinger hasn't been impressive at all. It's worrisome. I could see them, just leaning on Jonathan Taylor in the run game. So I don't know how many times it will be passing. They don't throw Pittman down the field either. So he's a guy that just needs a lot of targets and a lot of catches. And with expected of a high pass volume, I just don't know what he's going to do for you.
Yeah, I could be wrong, but I feel like the game script for them, I could be wrong, but I think that Jeff Saturday is going to be conservative. his best player on offense is Jonathan Taylor. I think he's somewhat practicing on a limited basis this week, so I think he could be a go. I like them relying more on the run game versus Ellinger just all of a sudden just ripping it down the field. Don't see that happening. So I think, if anything, maybe Pittman has some semblance of a floor, but his ceiling is non-existent. So to me, I'm sitting them. So here's a few guys. Let's see what you think, Joe. Would you start Gabe Davis over Michael Pittman, George Pickens over Michael Pittman, or Cortland Sutton over Michael Pittman?
Oh, jeez. Oh, man, Steve. This is tough, man. I think what it comes down to is, as we talk about ceiling and floor plays, Pittman really hasn't had a ceiling for the most of the year because he's not a down the field threat. The problem with the Gabe Davises of the world and George Pickens is they could potentially, really goose you. They're the down the field threats. If you need those ceiling plays, I feel comfortable, taking a dart throw on Pickens and Davis over Pittman. I compare Pittman and Sutton kind of close to the same. So I don't know if I'd be comfortable starting Sutton over Pittman.
Yeah, I would start all three. I have no concern starting any of them. I do agree with you that I don't agree with you on Pickens. I think Pickens, I definitely play ahead of him. As far as Gabe goes, yeah, he could goose you for sure. But I think so could Pittman. So to me, I think Gabe Davis, you saw what he did against Pittsburgh, so I like his opportunity there over Michael Pittman's all day long. So let's go over to the tight end group. So our first ceiling play is tight end Greg Dulcich against the Titans.
Yeah, Dulcich has been, ever since he got off of IR and gotten in there, I've actually been pretty surprised at how, for a rookie tight end, how easily he's just been able to come in and get the big plays down the field for this Broncos offense. It's something that they've really needed, and I feel like it's really, unlocked that offense a little bit and freed up that space for guys like Jeudy to really open up and run to the open space and create those big plays that the Broncos have needed. So, and then as we mentioned, with the Titans secondary, doesn't really worry you too much. And I think Greg Dulcich is a great ceiling play this week.
Yeah, I really liked Dulcich as a ceiling play. I could see him having over 50 yards, multiple catches, and a touchdown. I think he could get even more involved in that offense. Like you say, he started on IR, so he's still playing catch up with that offense, and it was already involved more so than I even thought, and I think you too. So coming out of the bye, I really like his prospects moving forward. They needed that in that offense, and they've been utilizing him pretty heavily. So I like him for this week. I think he could have a really good week because of the matchup and coming off the bye. They need him. So I really like him this week.
Yeah, absolutely. They need him 100%. They've gotten, nothing from the tight ends. Alberto is a healthy and active now, so they need somebody, and he hasn't been able to be, Alberto was never reliable for that down the field stretch that they really needed a tight end, and they've really found that in Dulcich.
So with our floor play, we're going back to another rookie, but Cade Otton going up against Seattle.
Yeah, I think Cade Otton's a safe floor play. He's a guy that's gotten at least 5 targets the last 2 or 3 games there. And I know I mentioned, Seattle's defense has been better, but, Brady's got to throw it to somebody out there. And I think he should be safe for 4 to 5 catches. And if he gets any touchdown, that's a bonus.
Yeah, Brady has always had a knack for getting the ball to the tight end, and that's been missing from that offense ever since Gronkowski retired. You're starting to see Otton getting more involved in the game plan, and I believe he's gotten at least 5 catches or something around there over these past few weeks. So he's only getting more and more involved. He had the game-winning touchdown last week. I think he's a really safe floor play, and he's probably going to give you more points. He may even be on your wire, or in dynasty leagues, you kind of maybe draft him as a flyer. Who knows? Maybe someone didn't draft him. I think he's a really good option this week as a safe floor play. All right, in our consensus sit for the week, might be a little bit surprising based on the matchup, but we're telling you to sit Tyler Higbee going up against the Cardinals.
Yeah, I know the matchup tells you against the Cardinals. I mean, there's two defenses that you want to exploit from the tight end position, and that's the Seahawks, as you mentioned, with Otton, and then the Cardinals, and that's who Higbee has. But I'm concerned because he's been not as heavily utilized the last few weeks as he had been earlier in the year, and then also I'm concerned with the concussion with Matt Stafford. I don't know if he's playing. He's still in concussion protocol, and then that's. Yeah, I don't. If whoever the backup is, I'm not confident that Higbee will be. You can rely on him.
Yeah, Higbee's just been less involved. He was getting heavy amount of targets, and then all of a sudden these past 3 weeks, it really has dropped off. And I know Arizona's a juicy matchup and it's tempting, but I think there's just better options out there, and I just like their potential over Higbee. So let's talk about a few and see if you agree, Joe. Would you start Dalton Schultz against Green Bay, Cole Kmet versus Detroit, or Cade Otton? We just talked about him. Cade Otton versus Seattle.
Yeah, I'd be willing to start all three of those guys over Higbee.
Yeah, I agree with you. I'd start all three of them, and I think that I like it. Maybe not as a juicy matchup, but I think that they're at the end of the day, they're going to score more than Higbee.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think Schultz against the Packers is the juiciest of matchups, but like you said, I think any of those guys should outscore Higbee anyways.
So that's our starts and sits for Week 10 for quarterbacks, running backs, receivers, and tight ends. We're relatively a new channel, so we try to create several videos on a weekly basis. So if you could like this video, hit the subscribe button for this channel, and hit the notification bell, we greatly appreciate it. As well as if you have comments, go ahead and put them down below. Do you have questions on who you should start and who you should sit this week? We're happy to give you any advice. So thank you so much for watching, and until next time.